Welcome back to the Richest Man in Babylon discussed. This is chapter 7, the Walls of Babylon. This is the shortest chapter in the book, and it covers a very simple principle. So the story here again is that the Assyrians are attacking Babylon while the king of Babylon and his army are away. So the Assyrians are looking to make a quick, conquering before the king can return. The obvious financial principles here are that we don't know when disaster is going to come. But we know that it will. It always does. There's nobody that escapes financial disaster. Some of us seem to get it more often than others. Murphy's Law, it seems to be a real force in the universe. The more prepared we are, the less often Murphy shows up. Here in the example, the allegory of this chapter is that Babylon was prepared. It had a defense system in place. It had large walls. It had thick gates. It had soldiers that were prepared and ready to die to keep the city safe. And that is the zealousness with which we need to defend our finances as well. We know that when disaster strikes, it can be brutal, and we will have to sacrifice elements of our lives to stay afloat. But if we are prepared for those, if we have our thick financial walls, if we're prepared for those events, then we can be survivors and we can conquer out of those circumstances. No attack upon the city having been anticipated during their absence, the defending forces were small. Nobody sees these kinds of things coming until they're here, and then it's too late. At one point, old Banzar, one of the older soldiers that was down on the streets of Babylon, was approached by a young child. And the child was scared and asking for reassurance. And this is what Banzar said. "Be not afraid, little one. The walls of Babylon will protect you and your mother and little brother and the baby. It was for the safety of such as you and the good Queen Semiramis built them over 100 years ago. Never have they been broken through. Go back and tell your mother and your little brother and the baby that the walls of Babylon will protect them, and they need have no fear." When we are prepared financially, we don't have any reason to fear, right? If we have $7 in our bank account, there's a lot to be afraid of, because if any significant financial event happens, you're going to be out of luck, right? It'd be like Babylon not having any walls and then the Assyrians rolling up. But if you have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, which is what a lot of people recommend, what we mean by that is how much money do you spend per month? Multiply that by at least 3, if not 6. And that's how much money you should have saved up in your rainy day fund. So if you're spending $4,000 a month, you should have an emergency fund of $12,000 or more. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but if you are prepared, you shall not fear. Having that kind of a buffer relieves us of a lot of tension. And then when those financial assaults come at us, we have our financial walls in place to protect us so that we don't have to pull out our investments prematurely. We don't have to sell a vehicle. We don't have to cancel our kids' piano lessons, whatever. We are prepared. We are protected, and we are strong as a financial force. So after over 4 weeks of the Assyrians trying to breach Babylon, finally they flee because the protection was sufficient. And this is what it says. "The walls of Babylon had once again repulsed a mighty and vicious foe, determined to loot her rich treasures and to ravish and enslave her citizens. Babylon endured century after century because it was fully protected. It could not afford to be otherwise." The walls of Babylon were an outstanding example of man's need and desire for protection. And then the author draws a direct connection from this allegory to the finances. He says, "In this day, behind the impregnable walls of insurance, savings accounts, and dependable investments, we can guard ourselves against the unexpected tragedies that may enter any door and seat themselves before any fireside." Be prepared. Use your PYFing that we've been talking about to build up a rainy day fund. And it needs to be a thick rainy day fund. Just like the walls of Babylon needed to be thick, so too does your protection. Get all the insurance coverage that you need. Do your research on what that should be. Make sure that you're ready, because you never know who's going to show up at your gates and when. That concludes our discussion of The Richest Man in Babylon, Chapter 7. Hope to see you in Chapter 8. Period. Oh my gosh.